All right, welcome back, my friends. And for those first time visitors, welcome. My name is James Valley, and this is page 4 of your next chapter. So today's topic is identities and standards. Now, last week I told you we'd take the next step together, so let's do that right now. Last week I started by talking about two major obstacles in our lives. The first being excuses, the second being distractions, and how we need to be conscious of those obstacles so we know how to avoid them in the future. Next, I went into the identity shift, and that's where we're going to begin today. Because identity, who you believe you are, well, that's just the beginning. But identity alone doesn't change your life. Your standards do. Identity will set your ceiling, but standards set the floor. And most of us live our entire lives trapped between the two. We dream like a person we want to become, but we tolerate like the person that we used to be. And nothing changes until those two things finally match. Let me show you what I mean. A few years ago, actually many years ago, I sat down in front of a professional resume writer. I handed her my resume and the one that I've been using for years, and I thought was amazing as it was. But I watched her face change as she looked at it. Not in a bad way, but sort of in a surprised way. And she looked at me and she said, James, you know that with your qualification experience, you should be making between 125 and 150,000 a year. I kind of laughed because, well, not because it was funny, but I felt it was impossible. I said, are you serious? I've been applying for $50,000 jobs. I thought I was good enough for. The jobs matched the identity that I'd built over the years, playing it small, playing it safe, but my skills were higher. My experience was higher, and my capability was much higher. But my identity still had me living at $50,000, and my standards, well, they were even lower. And I didn't even know what I was worth more. I didn't believe that I belonged in those rooms with the executives. I didn't believe that I could sit at those tables. So I never tried. And that's when it hit me. My life wasn't limited by my ability. It was limited by what I believed I was allowed to have. I mentioned last week that I was in a closed rating from the last 12 years of my Navy career. They were only advancing 2 or 3 cooks to chief petty officer each year in the entire submarine fleet. When I got out, I only believed I was a mediocre person and expected a mediocre salary. But that's not all. And well, I'll come back to that in a minute. But my identity was holding me at the level I believed I was. But identity isn't the only thing that holds people back. Sometimes it's standards. I once heard a speaker say something that stuck with me. He said, earning a person earning $250,000 a year isn't usually working harder than the person earning just $25,000 a year. The difference is standards. One person refuses to accept anything below a certain level, while the other has never raised the line to what they believe they are worthy of. Same intelligence, same work ethics, same potential, different standards, and different outcomes. And this isn't just about money. You can see that everywhere. Two people can have the same gym membership. One gets fit and the other doesn't. Two people can have the same 24 hours in a day. One builds a life they're proud of and the other stays stuck. Two people can have the same relationship issues. One grows and the other repeats the same patterns. The difference isn't luck, it isn't talent, it isn't opportunities. It's standards. Your standards show up in the smallest places. The condition of your car, do you keep it clean? Do you wash it? There's a trash in the back seat. The way you treat your body, um, the boundaries you set, the people you allow close to you, the habits you repeat, or the message you tolerate. That was one of my major problems. Back in my own life, I was raised on a farm with four older brothers. We worked hard doing chores in the barn and out in the fields, and we came in dirty and sometimes kind of smelly. And that was our norm. We'd wash up for dinner. Well, we'd wash our hands anyways. And after we got done eating, we'd go back out there and do more chores and stuff around the house. So can you imagine my poor mom? She tried as hard as she could to keep the house clean, but with five boys running around, tracking mud into the house, leaving our toys and stuff all over the place. So I grew up with a standard. It wasn't dirty, it was just cluttered, I guess. People would come and visit, but they knew it was a farm and they accepted the way it was. And that was the standard I grew up with. Now, 46 years later, I'm ashamed to admit that I really haven't changed that much. I don't track mud into the house and I don't stink usually. At least I don't think I do. But I come home and I drop the mail on the kitchen counter. I drop my keys, my sunglasses, my hat on the counter instead of putting them either in my office or in our bedroom where they belong. I get done using a tool in the house on something and I take it out to the garage, but instead of walking across the garage and putting it in the toolbox or where it belongs, I just set it right inside the door instead of, putting it away. I'll get back to that later, but we all know that later never comes. My wife, on the other hand, she was raised by a single mom, and if she'd left something out of place, she got a chancla upside the head. And if she let the door slam too hard, which she always complains about me about, her mom would use the chancla again and keep her in line. So in that instance, our standards are totally out of alignment. Am I dirty? No. Is the house mess? Not really. A little cluttered, but it's fine with me. I think it's okay. It's just my standard. But that doesn't work for her. Standards. I have learned to accept things that are subpar, and that in turn frustrates my wife. Not because I'm a good or bad person, but because standards always leak into behavior. Identity says, this is who I am, but standards say, this is what I will no longer accept. And when those two things rise together, your life rises with them. So let me ask you something, gently but honestly. Where have your standards been a little low? Where have you been tolerating something beneath you or beneath who you're becoming? Where have you settled for good enough when you know there's much more in you? Maybe it's your health, maybe it's your finances or relationships, maybe it's your environment or your self-talk. Maybe it's the way you show up for yourself. Maybe it's what you believe about your skill levels or the level of your responsibilities. Back to that Navy story I was talking to you about. As I said, I was passed up for promotion for 11 years. And not only did I not get the pay raise, but I also wasn't given the responsibility and authority that I should have. And I never got to experience being a boss with those skills. So when I got out of the Navy, naturally, I got a mid-level position, and I believe that was all I was qualified for. Identity is the spark, but standards are the structure. And together, they create the life you're stepping into. So this week, I want you to notice one thing, just one, that you have been tolerating. One area where your standards haven't caught up to your identity yet. And I want you to raise the line. Not 10 steps, not a complete overhaul, just one raised standard. Because that's how transformation actually begins. Not through massive efforts, but through one small, non-negotiable step. And next week, we'll take that next step together. All right, my friends, I know it's short today, but until next Saturday, let's keep walking this out together. Thank you for being here, and thank you for showing up for yourself. I'll see you next week for page 5 of your next chapter.